They photoshopped me out. All of them. Every single family picture from the last 5 years. Gone. Not just edited, not just cropped, but I was completely erased like I never existed. My face, my body, even my shadow sometimes, replaced with empty space or a slightly out of focus background. It was my cousin Sarah's wedding, a big event, and I was so excited for the official photo. Sarah's mom, Aunt Al, Carol, sent out a link to the online album saying, "Here are the precious memories, everyone." I clicked it, heart thumping with anticipation, ready to see myself smiling next to my sister, my parents, my nieces and nephews. Instead, I saw a gaping hole where I should have been. The first picture was of the whole family standing on the church steps. My parents, my sister Emily, her husband Mark, their 2 kids, my brother David, his wife Lisa, and their son. And then there was a gap between Emily and David. A perfect, symmetrical, human-shaped void. I was standing there, I remember it clearly. My blue dress, my hair done up, my awkward smile. But in the picture, it was just the church wall, my breath caught in my throat. I scrolled down, thinking it was a mistake, a glitch. Maybe it was just that one picture, but it wasn't. The next one was the reception. A candid shot of everyone laughing at the head table. I was sitting right next to my mom. In the photo, her arm was extended into thin air, and a part of the table where my plate should have been was empty. Then a picture from Christmas last year. We always took a big family photo in front of the tree. My spot, right in the center, was replaced by a slightly blurred ornament. It was meticulously done, professional even. Someone had paid good money to have me removed, not just from the wedding photos, but from every single family gathering since 2019. Every birthday, every holiday, every vacation picture they had shared online. I went back through old emails, old texts, clicked every link, every photo album they'd ever sent. Each one was the same. I was gone. My hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped my laptop. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. How could they do this? How could a family, my family, actively erase me from their history? It wasn't just the photos that hurt. It was the implication. It was the message loud and clear. You don't belong here. You are not part of us. You never were. It was a complete and utter repudiation of my existence within their family unit. It felt like a death, but worse, because I was still alive, still breathing, still feeling this unimaginable pain. I remembered the last 5 years, the slow creep of distance, the missed calls, the "we're busy" excuses when I suggested meeting up. I always blamed myself. I thought I was too busy, too distant. Maybe I didn't try hard enough. I thought it was a mutual drifting apart, a natural consequence of growing up and having separate lives. But this wasn't drifting. This was a deliberate act of deletion. This was a statement. They wanted me gone. They wanted to rewrite their family story as if I had never been a character in it. The sheer effort involved, the time, the money spent on professionally removing me from dozens of photos, spoke volumes about their commitment to this erasure. Cold wave of clarity washed over me, replacing the initial shock with a burning rage. All those times I tried to bridge the gap, all those phone calls that went unanswered, all those holidays I spent alone, wondering why they hadn't invited me to their seemingly smaller, more intimate gatherings. It wasn't me, it was them. They were actively cutting me out, and now I had the undeniable proof. This wasn't some misunderstanding or a simple family spat. This was a calculated, long-term campaign to erase. My eyes scrolled over the empty spaces in the pictures again. The ghost of my own smile, my own pose, haunting the blank spots. It was a brutal form of psychological warfare. I thought about the family gatherings I had missed, the ones where I was told they were just staying in or keeping it small. They were having family gatherings, full, joyous family gatherings, and I was being lied to and intentionally excluded. They were building new memories without me, and then deleting me from the old ones. It felt like I was losing my mind, like I was questioning my own memory of events. Did I actually attend that Christmas? Was I really at that birthday party? The photos said no. My heart knew yes. I stood up, pacing my living room. My hands were still shaking, but now it was with a different kind of energy. It was a furious tremor, not a trembling of fear or sadness. For years I had held on to hope, clung to the idea that maybe one day we would mend whatever had broken between us. That maybe they would see me again, the real me, not the version they had seemingly decided I was. But this act, this deliberate and malicious act of erasure, shattered any remaining illusions. There was no going back from this. This was an undeniable declaration of war. And if they wanted war, then they would get it. F5. It's 5 and 2:59. Adani vir over 4.45 billion years. A different kind of war. One that didn't involve Photoshop or social media posts, but something far more personal and impactful. Something that spoke to their true motivations, the kind of motivations that drove people to such extreme acts of cruelty. Because deep down, I knew what drove them. It was always about control, about appearances, about what they thought they were owed. And for too long, I had let them define my place in their world. Not anymore. Not after this. The first thought, the immediate, overwhelming thought, that formed in my mind with chilling clarity, was this. My will. They wanted me gone from their lives. Fine. They would be gone from mine, and from everything I possessed. This wasn't just about anger. This was about reclaiming my narrative, my future, and my own value. The shock was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface of my newfound fury. Clarity was sharper, cutting through years of confusion and self-blame. I had always tried to be the peacemaker, the understanding one, the one who tried to see things from their perspective. Even when their perspective seemed completely skewed or unfair, I had made excuses for their coldness, for their distance, for their casual dismissal. I told myself they were just busy, just stressed, just different. But what kind of busy? Stressed, or different person? Meticulously cropped someone out of every single family photograph for 5 straight years. This was no accident. This was no oversight. This was a deliberate, sustained campaign of emotional violence. And I was done being their victim. The pictures mocked me from the screen. A perfect, happy family. Without me, my erased presence screaming louder than any actual image. This wasn't just about my inheritance, though that was a powerful tool. This was about drawing a line in the sand. This was about saying, You don't get to hurt me like this and expect to gain anything from me ever again. This was about self-preservation, about protecting the last vestiges of my sanity and dignity from people who clearly had no regard for either. My family. The word felt hollow, bitter, and utterly meaningless now. I closed the laptop, the screen reflecting my own distorted face in the dim light of my living room. The image of the empty spaces where I should have been burned into my mind. This was the moment everything changed. This was the point of no return. I had been living in a foggy purgatory of confusion and hope for too long. Now the fog had lifted, revealing a stark and painful truth. And with that truth came a cold, hard resolve. They chose to erase them. Not from my memories, because that would be impossible. But from my future, from my responsibility, from my legacy. The will was just the beginning. It was more than just money. It was about respect. It was about acknowledging my existence, my worth. For years, I had been the fallback, the reliable one, the one who would always be there, even if they didn't appreciate it. I had been their emotional punching bag, their scapegoat, their conveniently forgotten relative. But I had also been someone they expected to benefit them, in some unspoken way in the long run. My money, my property, my future resources. It was a silent agreement, a default assumption. And now, I was breaking that agreement. I was shattering that assumption. And the thought, once shocking, now felt utterly liberating. The silence in my apartment was deafening, but it was no longer a lonely silence. It was a silence of determination. A silence that held the weight of a decision that would reverberate through my life, and eventually through theirs. They had thrown the first punch, a punch of invisibility and non-existence. I was about to throw mine, a punch of finality and consequence. And this punch, unlike theirs, would leave a visible mark, a very real, very legal mark. My family. People who should have loved me, protected me, included me. They had chosen to discard me, and now I would discard them. My will, a legal document that represented my final wishes. My legacy, my lasting mark on the world, would no longer include them. It was a drastic step, a public declaration of a private war. But they had forced my hand, they had made me disappear. Now, it was their turn to discover what it felt like to be erased. Not from a photograph, but from a future they had likely taken for granted. And that, I knew, would be a far more permanent and painful deletion. The memory of the last 5 years flooded my mind. A torrent of subtle snubs and outright rejections that now made terrifying sense. The time I called my mom on her birthday, and she sounded distracted, saying they were just having a quiet dinner at home. Later, I saw a picture of a huge party on Emily's social media, with my whole family, and an empty space where I should have been next to my mom, cake in hand. I had dismissed it then, thinking it was just a quick snapshot that didn't include everyone, or that I was being overly sensitive. But looking at the expertly photoshopped images now, the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying precision. They weren't just excluding me from the pictures, they were excluding me from the events themselves, and then rewriting history to make it look seamless. There was the summer vacation 2 years ago. I had suggested a family trip, even offered to pay for a large portion of it, but my parents had told me they were too busy, and the others had made vague excuses about conflicting schedules. Then, a few weeks later, my brother David posted a whole album of pictures from their spontaneous trip to the beach. A perfect, happy family vacation. And in every single shot, where I would have been building sandcastles with my nieces or swimming with my nephews, there was a pristine stretch of sand or an unobstructed view of the ocean. They had photoshopped me out of pictures of events I didn't even know were happening. That was a new level of insidious. They were living a separate, complete family life and ensuring that no evidence of my past involvement, or their present exclusion of me, would ever mar their carefully constructed facade. It wasn't just the big events either, it was the small ones. My nephew Leo's 3rd birthday party. I had sent a gift, a thoughtful toy truck I knew he would love. I called to wish him a happy birthday, and my sister Emily said they were having a small family thing, just cake and ice cream. But a picture from that day showed a bouncy castle, a clown, and dozens of people. And again my place next to Leo as he blew out his candles was conspicuously empty, replaced by a blurred corner of the living room. They didn't just remove me from the photos, they removed me from their narrative. They rewrote their own memories, deleting me from the story of their lives as if I were a typo to be corrected. I thought back to my grandmother, my Nana, who passed away 5 years ago. Her funeral was the last time the entire family had truly been together. Before this systematic erasure began, I remembered the comfort I felt surrounded by them, even in grief. We shared stories, we cried together, we were a family. But even those pictures, taken at the wake and the burial, now showed my absence. My arm, which had been linked with my mother's, was gone, replaced by a floral arrangement. My face, tear-streaked, was smoothed over with a blank wall behind my father. It was as if their grief was purer without my presence to contaminate it. This wasn't just about current events. This was about erasing my entire shared history with them. The memory of Nana brought a fresh wave of pain. She had always been the glue, the one who held us all together. She loved me fiercely, unconditionally. She always made sure I felt seen, heard, and loved. After she passed, I felt a shift. A subtle but distinct distancing from the rest of the family. I attributed it to the grief, to everyone finding their own way to cope. Now I wondered if her passing was merely an opportunity, a moment when the family felt they could finally act on whatever resentment they harbored towards me, without her loving influence to temper them. Was her death the catalyst? Was it the permission they needed to finally cut me out? The thought was chilling. I remembered a conversation with Nana a few months before she passed. She had hinted at some underlying tension, something about old hurts and misunderstandings within the family. She had looked at me sadly and said, "Family is a complicated thing, my dear. Sometimes the bonds are tested in ways you can't imagine." I had shrugged it off then, thinking she was just being philosophical. Now her words echoed with an ominous prescience. Was she trying to warn me? Did she see this coming? Did she know that I was being slowly marginalized? Even then, I tried to pinpoint the exact moment things started to unravel. It wasn't a big fight, not a dramatic blow-up. It was more like a slow leak, a gradual erosion of trust and connection. I had made a career choice a few years prior that my parents disapproved of. I decided to pursue a creative path instead of the corporate job they had always envisioned for me. They called it unstable, irresponsible, and selfish. I had tried to explain my passion, my need to follow my own dreams. They listened, but their eyes held a cold disapproval. My siblings, who had always followed the more traditional paths set out by our parents, seemed to echo their sentiments, subtly at first, then more overtly. Perhaps that was it. My independent spirit, my refusal to conform to their expectations. Maybe they saw my choices as a betrayal of their values, a rejection of the life they had carefully constructed for themselves. They were all successful, settled in traditional careers, living in comfortable suburban homes, raising their children according to a very specific playbook. I was the outlier, the one who chose a different path, who lived a different life. And perhaps that made me an inconvenient truth, a visible reminder that their carefully curated world wasn't the only one, or even the best one. My mind raced, connecting dots that had been invisible to me until now. Times my mother would subtly compare my life to Emily's, always highlighting Emily's stability and accomplishments. The way David would sometimes make backhanded comments about people who don't understand real work. I always brushed it off as sibling rivalry or parental worry. Now, it felt like a deliberate campaign to diminish me, to make me feel less than, so that their eventual erasure of me would seem justified, even logical. They had to create a reason for my non-existence, even if it was just in their own minds, and then project that onto me. The pain of this realization was profound. It wasn't just that they removed me from photos. It was that they had been systematically devaluing me for years, laying the groundwork for this ultimate act of rejection. They chipped away at my self-worth, made me question my decisions, and slowly isolated. The photos were just the final, undeniable proof of their success. They had not only erased my image, but they had tried to erase my confidence, my sense of belonging, and my very identity within the family unit. I remembered a family vacation from years ago, before Nana passed, before things went truly sour. We were at the beach, and I had gotten a terrible sunburn. My mother, usually so attentive, had just given me a quick aloe vera application and then gone back to her book. Nana, however, had fussed over me, brought me cool compressors, and sat with me until I felt better. It was a small moment, but it highlighted a pattern I had always subconsciously known. Nana was often my true source of comfort and unconditional love in that family. Her absence left a void, not just in my heart, but in the family dynamic itself. And it seems that void was then filled with a calculated coldness towards me. I realized now that I had always been slightly on the periphery, even when I thought I was central. I was the eccentric one, the one who danced to the beat of her own drum. And while Nana celebrated that, the rest of the family perhaps just tolerated it, waiting for the opportunity to cut the cord entirely. The inheritance, the family legacy, the bloodline. These things were important to them, perhaps more important than actual relationships or love. My independent choices, my refusal to be molded into their image, might have been seen as a threat to their carefully constructed lineage. And then there was the house. My parents' house, the one I grew up. It was a beautiful old Victorian, steeped in family history. Nana had always said it would be passed down through the generations. And she often spoke about how it would be divided among her grandchildren. I had always assumed I would have a share, a piece of that history. But now, looking at the photos, seeing myself erased from the very walls I grew up within, a terrifying thought surfaced. Was this erasure partly about ensuring my eventual exclusion from that inheritance as well? Was this a preemptive strike, a way to justify cutting me out of the will, should the topic ever arise? The idea sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just emotional, it might be financial too. And that realization solidified my resolve. They had played their hand, now it was my turn. The weight of the last 5 years settled on me, a heavy blanket of deception and calculated cruelty. Every forgotten birthday, every missed holiday, every vague excuse now coalesced into a clear, horrifying picture. They hadn't just been busy, they had been actively building a life without me, a life they meticulously documented and then edited for public consumption. And I, in my naive hope, had been making excuses for them, blaming myself for the growing distance. The shame of my own blind trust burned hot, mixing with the fury. I thought about the last time I had truly felt like part of the family. It was at Nana's funeral. The raw grief had momentarily stripped away the facades, and we had clung to each other, a united front in sorrow. But even then I now saw The seeds of division were being sown. My mother, in a quiet moment, had mentioned her desire to keep the family tight-knit and focused on the future. Words that now felt like a thinly veiled warning. She had looked at me pointedly, perhaps judging my unconventional life choices even amidst her grief. My brother David had barely spoken to me, preferring to stand with his wife and kids, a self-contained unit. Emily had offered fleeting sympathy, then quickly gravitated towards our parents. The unity I felt was a fragile illusion, shattered by the reality of the doctored photographs. The memories of various family gatherings, both before and after Nana's passing, now played like a horror film in my mind. I saw myself, always slightly apart, always trying a little too hard to fit in, to bridge the unspoken gaps. The forced smiles, the awkward silences when I tried to contribute, to conversations that seemed to have an invisible barrier. It wasn't just that they removed me from the photos. They had been subtly removing me from the fabric of their lives for much longer. The Photoshop was merely the physical manifestation of an emotional amputation that had been underway for years. There was one incident that now stood out with agonizing clarity. About a year after Nana passed, my parents celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. I flew across the country, rearranged my work schedule, and bought them an expensive, thoughtful gift. When I arrived, the house was already full of relatives and friends I hadn't seen in years. My parents gave me a perfunctory hug, then quickly turned back to their guests. Throughout the evening, I felt like an unwelcome intruder. My sister Emily cornered me at one point, whispering, "You know, it's really important for Mom and Dad to have a stress-free celebration. Your life choices, they worry them." I was stunned. I tried to explain that I was happy, that my life was fulfilling, but she just nodded condescendingly and walked away. Looking back, I realized that I was probably photoshopped out of all those anniversary pictures too. I shuddered at the thought of the money they must have spent. The cost, that was another sting. This wasn't a casual removal. This was a professional job, expensive and time-consuming. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted it to be perfect, seamless. They wanted to erase any trace of my existence from their carefully curated public image. It spoke volumes about their commitment to this charade, their willingness to invest financially in my non-existence. This wasn't just about a disagreement. This was about a deep, underlying animosity, a desire to pretend I never even existed. And the thought that they put so much effort into this elaborate deception was almost harder to bear than the betrayal itself. I started to list mentally the people who were now absent from my life. My parents, my sister Emily and her family, my brother David and his family, my Aunt Carol and her daughter Sarah. The entire nuclear and extended family, it seemed, had silently agreed to this pact of erasure. And I had been the last one to know. The realization was sickening. I had been living a lie, believing I still had a family, even a distant one, while they were actively engaged in making me disappear. The rage which had momentarily subsided into a dull ache flared again, hot and righteous. This wasn't just about my feelings. This was about their ethics, their morality, their complete disregard for another human being's emotional well-being. What kind of people do this? What kind of family systematically erases one of their own? The answer was clear: a cruel one, a toxic one, and a family I no longer wanted any part of. The legal part of my brain, the one I used for my own work, kicked in. The will. It wasn't just about punishing them, though that was certainly a driving force. It was about protecting myself, my legacy, my future. They had shown me their true colors, and I could no longer afford to be naive. If they were willing to erase me from their past, they would be just as willing to try and take from my future, my assets, my hard-earned life. They had shown their hand, and it was a handful of betrayal. I needed to act. Not in anger, not impulsively, but with the same calculated precision they had used to erase me. My response had to be permanent, undeniable and effective. Just as their photoshopped images were a permanent record of my absence, my revised will would be a permanent record of their exclusion. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. This was my power, my agency, my way of asserting my existence in the face of their deliberate erasure. I pictured the look on their faces when they eventually discovered my decision. The shock, the outrage, the feigned hurt. It wouldn't be pretty, but it would be earned. Every single tear, every single angry word would be a direct consequence of their own actions. They had chosen this path. They had chosen to sever the ties. And now, they would live with the consequences of that choice. The game was no longer one-sided. I was finally playing too, and I was playing to win. The next morning, the first thing I did was search for a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one specializing in estate planning, someone who understood the gravity of such a decision. I needed someone sharp, discreet, and utterly unshakable. The thought of walking into an office and explaining this bizarre, heartbreaking situation filled me with a fresh wave of dread. How do you tell a stranger that your entire family has photoshopped you out of their lives? It sounded like a storyline from a bad movie, but it was my reality. I found a highly rated firm downtown, one with glowing reviews about their empathy and professionalism. I made an appointment for the very next day, explaining over the phone that it was a highly sensitive and urgent matter. The receptionist, bless her, didn't ask too many questions, just booked me in. As I waited for the appointment, I started to compile my thoughts, to gather my resolve. My current will was simple. Everything divided equally among my parents, my siblings and their children. It was a standard, default will, created years ago when I still believed in the fairy tale of a loving, cohesive family. Now, it felt like a mocking testament to a relationship that no longer exists. Every name on that document felt like a personal betrayal, a reminder of the trust I had so freely given, and they had so ruthlessly shattered. I pulled out the old paper copy of the will, tracing the names with a finger that still trembled slightly. My mother, my father, Emily, David, my nieces and nephews. All of them beneficiaries. All of them erased me from their lives. How could I, in good conscience, leave my hard-earned assets, my life's work, to people who treated me with such contempt? The answer was simple. I couldn't. It would be a final act of self-betrayal, a concession to their power over me, even after death. And I was done with that. The decision to remove them felt less like an act of revenge, and more like an act of self-preservation. It was a boundary, a line drawn firmly in the sand. If they didn't want me in their lives, they certainly couldn't have my legacy. My money, my property, my belongings, they were extensions of myself, pieces of my journey. To leave them to the very people who had tried to erase me would be to allow them to profit from their cruelty, to validate their actions. And I would not allow it. I thought about what I would do with my assets instead. There were charities I deeply believed in, causes that mattered to me, friends who had stood by me through thick and thin, who had shown me more kindness and true family spirit than my own blood relatives ever had. People who saw me, truly saw me, not as a disappointment or an inconvenience, but as a valued friend. The thought of leaving my inheritance to them, or to organizations dedicated to making the world a better place, felt right. It felt like a reassertion of my values, a testament to the life I had chosen, the life my family had so scorned. The next day, walking into the lawyer's office, my stomach was a knot of nerves and determination. The office was sleek and modern, a comforting contrast to the messy emotional chaos I carried within me. The lawyer, Miss Davies, was exactly as described. Kind eyes, a calm demeanor, and an air of quiet competence. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began my story. I started with the photos, pulling out my laptop and opening the albums, letting the images speak for themselves. I watched her face as she scrolled through them, her initial polite smile slowly fading into a look of disbelief, then shock, and finally, a profound sadness. She didn't interrupt, didn't comment, just let me tell my tale of betrayal, of gradual exclusion, of the crushing realization that I had been systematically erased. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. Miss Davies closed my laptop gently. "I have never heard anything quite like this," she said, her voice soft. "This is truly a heartbreaking situation." Her validation, her simple acknowledgement of the pain was almost overwhelming. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. "I want to change my will," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I want to remove them. All of them. My parents, my siblings, their children. Everyone who participated in this, or stood by and allowed it to happen." She nodded, her expression serious. "Of course. You have every right to do so. Your will is a reflection of your wishes. We can draft a new one, ensuring it's legally ironclad." She then explained the process, the legal intricacies, the importance of clear language to prevent future challenges. She asked me about my assets, my wishes for my beneficiaries, my funeral arrangement. We went through every detail, systematically dismantling the old will and building a new one from the ground up. Every time I named a family member to be excluded, a tiny part of me winced. It was a final, definitive severing. But with each exclusion, another part of me felt a quiet strength, a sense of reclaiming my autonomy. This was my life. These were my choices. And this was my final statement to people who had decided I didn't deserve to exist in their world. "Are you sure about this?" Miss Davies asked gently at one point, not challenging me, but simply ensuring I was making a fully informed decision. "This is a significant step. It will likely cause a great deal of fallout." "I am sure," I said, meeting her gaze directly. They made their choice. They decided I was not family. They spent years erasing me from their past. I am simply ensuring they are erased from my future. There is no going back from what they did. This is my answer." She nodded, a look of understanding in her eyes. "Then we will proceed exactly as you wish." As she took notes, meticulously detailing my new wishes, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The grief was for the family I thought I had, the illusion I had clung to for so long. The liberation was from the burden of their expectations, their judgment, and their cruelty. I was finally free. Free to define my own family, my own legacy, my own work. And the thought of that freedom, forged in such pain, felt like the first breath I had truly taken in years. The will was not just a legal document. It was my declaration of independence. The next few weeks were a blur of legalities and emotional processing. Miss Davies and her team drafted the new will, incorporating all my specified beneficiaries and exclusion. It was a meticulous process, ensuring every detail was ironclad, leaving no room for doubt or challenge. Each time I reviewed a draft, my finger tracing the names of charities and loyal friends who would now inherit my estate, I felt a mix of solemnity and satisfaction. This was it. This was the definitive break. As I signed the final document with witnesses present, a strange quiet settled over me. It wasn't triumph, not exactly. It was more like the calm after a long, devastating storm. The storm of betrayal, of heartbreak, of furious realization. The paper rustled softly as I signed my name, a period at the end of a very painful chapter. The old will, with its naive assumptions and misplaced affections, was shredded, gone, just like I was gone from their photos. The hardest part was the quiet aftermath. The legal work was done, but the emotional work was just beginning. I found myself reliving moments, dissecting conversations, searching for clues I had missed. The subtle dismissals, the averted gazes, the sudden changes in topic whenever I brought up family gatherings. It was like a giant puzzle slowly clicking into place, revealing a picture I never wanted to see. The depth of their deception, the sheer commitment to this elaborate charade was truly unsettling. I realized how much emotional energy I had spent over the years, trying to bridge the gap, trying to reconnect, trying to understand what I had done wrong. I had blamed myself, convinced that my unconventional choices or my independent spirit were the root of their disapproval. Now I saw it differently. My independence was a threat to their carefully curated world, a world where everyone conformed, everyone followed the same path, everyone knew their place. I didn't fit, and instead of accepting that, they decided to erase me. The silence from my family was deafening. They still hadn't reached out since the Photoshop discovery, not even a casual text. I hadn't confronted them directly after that initial shock, not yet. The decision to remove them from my will had solidified my resolve to protect my peace. Any direct confrontation, I now understood, would only lead to gaslighting, denial, or more pain. They would never admit what they did. They would spin it, twist it, turn it back on me. I had to choose my battles, and my battle was now one of quiet, dignified self-preservation. I started to focus on rebuilding my life, not around the void my family had left, but around the genuine connections I still had. My friends, who had always been my chosen family, rallied around me. They listened. They offered comfort. They validated my pain without judgment. They didn't try to make excuses for my family. They simply acknowledged the cruelty of it all. Their support was a balm to my raw wounds. "You deserve so much better," my friend Liam said, one evening, as I recounted the story, showing him the photoshopped images. He shook his head in disbelief, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sympathy. "This is beyond messed up. It's truly evil." His words, blunt and honest, cut through the last vestiges of my self-doubt. It wasn't me, it was them. I also found solace in my creative work, throwing myself into projects that allowed me to express the depth of my emotions. Pain, the anger, the sense of being erased, it all found an outlet in my art. It was a way of reclaiming my voice, of asserting my existence when my own family had tried to silence. But even with the support and the creative outlet, there were moments of profound loneliness. Holidays were particularly hard. My phone used to buzz with family texts, even if they were just generic well wishes. Now, there was nothing. The silence screamed louder than any argument ever could. I grieved for the family I had lost, even though they were still alive. It was a strange, complicated form of grief, mourning a relationship that had died a slow, agonizing death. I wondered sometimes if they knew I had found the photos. Did they wonder why I hadn't lashed out? Why I hadn't caused a scene? Did they assume I hadn't noticed, or that I was too weak to react? The continued silence was a testament to their self-absorption, their inability to truly empathize. They were so consumed by their own narrative, their own perfect family image, that they couldn't even fathom the devastation they had inflicted. I started to practice mindfulness, to ground myself in the present, to stop replaying the past on an endless loop. I focused on what I could control, my reactions, my choices, my future. couldn't change what they did, but I could change how I responded to it. And my response was to prioritize my own well-being, to protect my peace, and to ensure that their actions had lasting consequences for them, not for me. The thought of the will, now safely stored and legally binding, brought a quiet strength. It was a safety net, a shield against any future attempts they might make to re-enter my life for financial gain, because I knew, deep down, that if they ever found out about the will, their true motivations would be laid bare. It wouldn't be about wanting me back in their lives. It would be about the money. And that knowledge, while painful, also armed me with an undeniable truth. The process of grief is not linear. Some days I felt strong and resilient, ready to face the world. Other days the pain would resurface, a raw ache in my chest, a sense of profound abandonment. But each time I reminded myself of the photoshopped images, of the cold, calculated cruelty, and each time the anger, mixed with a growing sense of self-respect, pulled me back from the brink. They had tried to erase me, but I was still here, and I was stronger than they ever knew. The change in the will was a necessary act of self-defense. It was my way of saying, you can't have me, and you can't have what's mine. It was a declaration of my independence, my sovereignty over my own life and legacy. And in that declaration I found a surprising measure of peace. A hard-won, deeply painful, but utterly empowering peace. I knew the day would come when they found out. Maybe after my death, maybe sooner if the information somehow leaked. And I knew the fallout would be immense. But I was ready for it. I had faced their betrayal, their erasure, their calculated cruelty. I had emerged from it, bruised but not broken. And I had forged a new path, a path where my value was not determined by their acceptance, but by my own strength and resilience. The first ripple came not from my immediate family, but from a distant cousin, Aunt Martha, who had always been a bit of a gossip, but also surprisingly perceptive. She lived in a different state, and mainly kept up with family news through social media and the occasional phone call. One day, she called me out of the blue, her voice hesitant. "Honey," she began, "I am hearing things about your will. Is it true what they're saying?" My heart seized. How could she know? I hadn't told anyone outside of my lawyer and a couple of very trusted friends, none of whom would ever betray my confidence. "What exactly are you hearing, Aunt Martha?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "they're saying you've cut everyone out, the whole family, that you are leaving everything to, well, to strangers and charities." She paused, as if bracing herself for my reaction. "Your mother is apparently beside herself, and Emily and David are furious." A wave of relief washed over me, immediately followed by a surge of anger. So they knew. Or at least rumors had reached them. And their reaction wasn't concern for me, not sorrow for the broken relationship, but fury over the potential loss of inheritance. It confirmed everything I suspected. Their motivations were purely transactional. "And what are they saying about why I would do such a thing, Aunt Martha?" I asked, my voice now laced with a cold edge. She hesitated. "They're saying you've become bitter, unreasonable, that you are punishing them for your own life choices. Your mother says you've always been difficult." My blood ran cold. Difficult? Is that what they're calling it now? Erasing me from every single family photograph for the last 5 years, pretending I don't exist. Is that what they call difficult? Aunt Martha gasped. "Photoshopped you out? What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I chose to reveal their cruelty. "Aunt Martha," I said, my voice clear and firm, "I found out months ago. Every single family picture they've posted since Nana passed, I am gone. Erased. They paid someone to remove me. From Christmas photos, birthday parties, even Sarah's wedding. They created a fictional history where I don't exist. They've been actively cutting me out of their lives and then deleting me from their past. Aunt Martha was silent for a long moment. I could hear her breathing, ragged and shocked. "No," she finally whispered. "They wouldn't. That's monstrous." "It's true," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I have the proof, and when I found out, I realized their true intentions. They don't want me in their lives. They don't see me as family. So why should I leave them anything? My will is a reflection of my life, my values, and the people who truly matter to me. And they are not those people." Aunt Martha started to cry. "Oh, honey, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I always wondered why you weren't in those pictures. But I thought maybe you just weren't there, or that you were taking the photo. I never dreamed." Her voice trailed off, overcome with emotion. Her genuine shock and sorrow, so different from the family's fury, was oddly comforting. At least one person saw the truth. "It's okay, Aunt Martha," I said, trying to reassure her. "I've made my peace with it. It hurts, but it's also given me clarity. And now I am moving on." After we hung up, I knew the rumors would spread like wildfire. Aunt Martha, for all her kindness, was a notorious family conduit. It wouldn't be long before my parents, Emily and David, received direct confirmation, not just of the will change, but of my knowledge of their actions. And indeed, the calls started coming. First my mother. Her voice, usually carefully modulated, was shrill. "What is this I am hearing? Are you really so vindictive? Your own family. How could you do this to us?" "To you?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "How could you do this to me? How could you erase me from our entire family history? How could you pretend I don't exist, then get angry when I make that reality legally binding?" She paused, clearly unprepared for my directness. "What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous. No one erased you." Her voice surprisingly was calm now, the familiar gaslighting starting. "You are imagining things. You've always been so sensitive." "Mom," I said, my voice steady, "I have the photos. All of them. Professionally edited. I am gone. Dozens of them. Don't insult my intelligence or my memory. You know what you did." "You all did." There was a long silence on the other end. Then a low guttural sound, like a sob caught in her throat. But it wasn't a sob of remorse. It was a sound of frustrated rage. "You ungrateful child," she finally spat. "After everything we've done for you, you are throwing away your family for some imagined slight." "Imagined slight?" I repeated, my voice rising. "This isn't imagined. It's a permanent record of your cruelty. And yes, I am throwing away the family that discarded me. Because that's what you did. You threw me away. And now you are experiencing the consequences." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline. The call from Emily came next, even more aggressive. "You think you are so high and mighty, don't you? Cutting us out like this? We're family. You always were the problematic one, never fitting in. This just proves it." "Problematic?" I echoed, my voice flat. I was problematic. Because I chose a different life path. Because I didn't conform to your expectations. Is that why you decided to erase me from every picture and every family memory? Because I was an inconvenience, she scoffed. You are overreacting. It was just a few photos, and frankly, you weren't always around anyway. We were just trying to make them look cohesive. Cohesive? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You literally photoshopped me out. You paid money to make me disappear, and you expect me to believe it was for cohesion. It was an act of deliberate malice. And now, you are facing the consequences of that malice. Enjoy your cohesive family, without any of my assets in your future. I hung up again. David's call was short and sharp. You are a disgrace. Don't ever contact us again. Don't worry, I replied, before he could hang up. The feeling is mutual. The call stopped. The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't the silence of ignorance, but the silence of an open wound, festering with resentment and the knowledge of broken trust. The truth was out. They knew I knew. And their fury, directed at me, confirmed their guilt, their lack of remorse, and their absolute self-serving nature. The will, it seemed, had done exactly what I intended. It had pulled back the curtain on their true colors, revealing the transactional nature of their so-called love. And the painful, undeniable truth was that it had always been about the money, about their expectations, about their carefully constructed image. And I was no longer a part. Calls from my family dwindled to nothing, replaced by the ominous silence that often follows a significant break. It was a strange kind of peace, tinged with a persistent ache of loss. The loss of a family I thought I had, the loss of an idealized past that was now irrevocably tarnished, but also the liberation from the constant pressure of trying to fit in, of craving acceptance from people who clearly had no intention of giving it. The news of my will change and my discovery of the photoshopped images continued to reverberate through the wider family network. Aunt Martha became an unwitting messenger, her initial shock giving way to a quiet support for me. Other distant relatives reached out, some with genuine concern, others with thinly veiled curiosity. It was a strange form of public trial where I was both the plaintiff and the accused. Some relatives, usually the more traditional ones, tried to mediate. Family is family. One cousin texted, "You can't just cut them out." I simply replied, "They cut me out first. I am just making it official." I refused to engage in long arguments or justifications. My truth was clear. Their actions spoke for themselves. My loyal friends became my rock. They listened patiently, never tiring of my recounting of the pain, the betrayal. They celebrated my small victories, like the sense of calm after a difficult day. They reminded me of my worth, of the life I had built, independent of my family's approval. They were the true family I had chosen, the ones who saw me for who I was, flaws and all, and loved me unconditionally. I immersed myself in my work, finding solace and purpose in creation. My art became a reflection of my healing journey, a way to process the raw emotions. I painted themes of invisibility and emergence, of shattered illusions and newfound strength. Each brushstroke was a testament to my resilience, a defiant refusal to be erased. I also sought therapy because the emotional weight of it all was immense. A therapist provided a safe space to unpack years of subtle abuse, of feeling like an outsider, of constantly questioning my own sanity. She helped me understand the dynamics of gaslighting and emotional manipulation, how my family had systematically undermined my confidence. She validated my feelings, confirming that my reaction was not overreacting, but a healthy response to profound trauma. "You are not losing your family," she told me during one session. "You are grieving the family you thought you had, and embracing the family you truly deserve." Her words resonated deeply. It was a subtle but powerful shift in perspective. I wasn't just reacting to their cruelty. I was actively building a new life, a new definition of family. The loneliness was still there sometimes, especially during holidays or when I saw other families celebrating together. Pang of what might have been, of what I had always longed for, was a sharp, persistent ache. But it was no longer consuming. It was a scar, a reminder of a wound that had healed, leaving behind a mark of strength. I started to reevaluate my entire life, shedding relationships and patterns that no longer served me. The betrayal from my family had been a brutal awakening, but it had also forced me to confront other areas where I had allowed myself to be diminished or undervalued. I spoke up more at work, set firmer boundaries with acquaintances, and prioritized my own needs without guilt. I was learning to fiercely protect my peace, a lesson learned through the crucible of extreme pain. The thought of my family faded into the background, becoming a distant hum rather than a constant roar. I rarely check social media now, and when I did, I scrolled past any updates from them. I no longer cared about their curated image, their fake happiness. Their reality was built on a foundation of deceit, and I wanted no part. I occasionally wondered about their reaction to the official news of the will change. Did they finally understand the gravity of their actions? Did they fear any remorse? The rational part of me knew the answer was probably no. They were likely still consumed by their sense of injustice, their self-pity, and their anger over the lost inheritance. They were victims in their own narrative, and I was the villain, and I was okay with that. Being their villain meant being true to myself. I started to plan for my future, not just my will, but my life. I considered moving, perhaps to a new city, a place where I could truly start fresh, unburdened by the ghosts of the past. The idea of a completely new beginning, a blank canvas upon which to paint a life truly of my own design, was incredibly appealing. The photoshopped images, once a source of searing pain, now felt like a relic of a past I had survived. They were a reminder of how far I had come, of the strength I had found within myself. They had tried to erase me, but in doing so, they had inadvertently made me stronger, more resilient, and more determined to live an authentic life. My will, now a formal, unchallengeable document, felt like a silent declaration of my sovereignty. It was more than just assets. It was my final word, my permanent stamp on the world, reflecting my values and my chosen connections. It was a testament to the fact that I existed, I mattered, and I had agency, even when my own blood family tried to deny it. The silence from my family was the deepest silence of all, the silence of absolute severance. It was the silence of a void they create, and it was the silence that ironically allowed me to finally hear my own voice, clear and strong, for the very first time. I was not erased, I was reborn. And the future, filled with chosen family and true purpose, stretched out before me, bright and unblemished by their dark shadows. The scar remained, a testament to what was lost, but it was also a badge of honor, a symbol of survival and triumph. The journey was long and arduous, marked by moments of profound despair and triumphant breakthrough. The initial shock of discovering the photoshopped images had been a brutal awakening, stripping away years of carefully constructed illusions. It had felt like an actual death, the death of a family I had always believed in, despite the subtle signs of dysfunction. But after the initial shock came the slow, painful process of understanding, of acknowledging the deliberate cruelty, and then of rebuilding. I never did confront them face to face. After the phone calls that revealed their anger over the will and their continued denial about the photos, I knew there was no point. The capacity for self-deception and gaslighting was infinite. A face-to-face confrontation would only have provided them with more opportunities to manipulate, to play the victim, to twist the narrative to their advantage. I refused to give them that power. My silence, my disengagement was my most powerful weapon. Denied them the emotional response they likely craved, the validation of their perceived victimhood. I focused on my own healing. Therapy continued to be a lifeline, helping me navigate the complex emotions of grief, anger, and liberation. I learned to recognize the patterns of narcissistic behavior in my family, how their need for control and their obsession with appearance had driven their actions. It wasn't about me, it was about them. This realization was both painful and incredibly freeing. It allowed me to shed the burden of self-blame, to understand that their actions were a reflection of their own brokenness, not mine. My chosen family grew stronger. My friends became my anchors, a network of love and support that far surpassed anything my biological family had ever offered. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through life's challenges, and simply existed in each other's lives with genuine affection and respect. Their acceptance was a balm to the soul, teaching me what true family felt like. I learned to trust my intuition again. For so long, I had dismissed my gut feelings about my family, telling myself I was being too sensitive, too demanding. But the photoshopped images were undeniable proof that my instincts had been right all along. They had been trying to erase me, subtly at first, then overtly for years. Reclaiming my intuition, trusting my own perception of reality, was a crucial part of my healing. The experience also deepened my empathy for others. I started volunteering at a local charity that supported individuals who had been ostracized by their families. Listening to their stories, sharing my own, created a profound sense of connection and purpose. I realized that my experience, while uniquely painful, was not entirely isolated. Many people navigated the complexities of toxic family dynamics, and finding a community of understanding was invaluable. The money I had designated for my family in my old will was now earmarked for these charities, and for a few close friends who had always stood by me. Knowing that my legacy would support causes I believed in, and people who genuinely loved me, brought a sense of profound peace and satisfaction. It felt like my life's work would truly make a difference, far beyond the narrow confines of a family that had discarded me. Years passed. The initial shock and raw pain faded, replaced by a quiet strength and a deep sense of self-awareness. I rarely thought about my biological family anymore. They were a distant memory, a chapter closed. The photoshopped images remained on an old hard drive, a stark reminder of a past that had almost consumed me, but ultimately made me stronger. They were a monument to my survival. I never heard from them again directly. No more angry phone calls, no more attempts at gaslighting. The silence was absolute. I sometimes saw glimpses of their lives through mutual acquaintances or social media posts from others. They continued to present a picture of a perfect, cohesive family, oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant of the gaping void they had created in their own lives by cutting me out. Their carefully constructed facade remained intact, for them at least. But for me, their absence was a presence. It was the presence of peace, of freedom, of the unburdened space to build a life on my own terms. I had not been erased. I had simply stepped out of their picture, refusing to be a background blur or an empty space. I had chosen to paint my own picture, vibrant and full, with people who truly belonged in it. The story of the photoshopped family and the changed will became a powerful narrative in my own life. It was a testament to resilience, to the importance of self-worth, and to the fact that family is not always defined by blood, but by love, respect, and acceptance. It was a story of transformation, of turning profound pain into powerful purpose. And when my time came, whenever that would be, my will would stand as my final, undeniable statement. It would speak of my values, my relationships, and my unwavering belief in the power of true connection. It would be a testament to a life lived authentically, a life that refused to be erased. The photoshopped images were their story. The will was mine, and my story was one of strength, survival, and ultimately a fierce, hard-won peace.